Well, hey guys, you're looking at the Mississippi Monument at the Shiloh National Military Park. Before we come back out here, we're going to take you around Corinth and show you the homes that the generals who planned this affair stayed in. Let's go. Of course, you can't talk about generals and the Battle of Shiloh without talking about General Albert Sidney Johnston. Sidney Johnston, who was the Confederate commander in the West, made his headquarters at Rose Cottage when he arrived here the first couple days of April in 1862. Now, Rose Cottage no longer stands, but this is the site where it stood when Johnston decided to gather his army here in Corinth after his defensive line from Tennessee and Kentucky had collapsed with the fall of Forts Henry and Donelson. Plans were made right here to attack the United States Army encamped at Pittsburgh Landing. Rose Cottage was owned by William and Florida Inge at the time of the battle, and in fact, Florida hid a couple sandwiches and a piece of cake in his coat pocket before Johnston left with the Confederate Army headed for battle. That piece of cake was still in the general's pocket when they brought his body back on April the 7th. Next is the Veranda Curley House, and it was built in 1857. You see, Corinth didn't exist much before that, and by 1862, they found themselves home to about 50,000 people. The Veranda House was used as headquarters by Confederate General Braxton Bragg before the Battle of Shiloh. Bragg and Johnston would have met here while plans for the battle were being made. After Confederates abandoned Corinth in May, United States General Henry Halleck occupied the house, and then Union General Grenville Dodge moved in until the United States left Corinth in 1864. Confederate General John Bell Hood stayed here for 6 days in January of 1865. Right across the street from the Veranda Curley House is Corinth City Hall. The Mitchell House once stood here. During the Civil War, it served as headquarters for United States and Confederate generals alike. Union Generals Grant and Sherman and Don Carlos Buell all occupied the house at one time or the other. Confederate General Frank Cheatham also called the Mitchell House his headquarters. Next, we're going to have a look at the Duncan House. But first, right beside Duncan House is this little pocket park, I'll call it. As the signs in this park indicate, the reason for the war coming to Corinth was that few places were more important to either side than the junction of the Memphis and Charleston and Mobile and Ohio railroads. This junction gave Corinth the moniker Crossroads of the Confederacy. It was moved to its current location after World War I, but during the Civil War, Confederate General P.G.T. Beauregard used Duncan House as his headquarters. When the United States occupied Corinth, the house was the headquarters of William Rosecrans. He remained in the house until after the Battle of Corinth. Duncan House, like most of these homes we're looking at today, is a private residence. Next, we're going to take a look at what's called Oak House. It also was built in 1857. It was built for a guy named William Kirkpatrick. Kirkpatrick served in the Civil War, and afterwards he was a judge and then became mayor of Corinth. During the time of the Battle of Shiloh, and even afterwards during the siege of Corinth, Oak House was the headquarters of Confederate General Leonidas Polk. After the Confederates left, Union General Pleasanton occupied the house. Well, folks, there are several more very interesting structures here, homes and other buildings that have fantastic stories to tell, especially as related to the Battle of Shiloh. We're going to move out to the battlefield to tell you several interesting stories in this series of videos, but we sure do hope that you've seen something here in Corinth that will make you want to visit for yourself sometimes. And if you've hung around this long, bump that like button. Thank you.